Welcome to the Nutrition Collaborative podcast, where we cut through the noise, bust the myths, and bring you nothing but truth about health, fitness, and everything in between. I'm Alec Moore, dietitian, and each week we'll dive into what really works when it comes to achieving lasting health and fitness. No gimmicks, no BS, just real talk, real success stories, and a holistic approach to living your healthiest life. Whether you're here for practical tips, inspiration from real client journeys, or just to find out what's actually worth your time, this is the podcast for you. Let's break it down, get empowered, and focus on what truly matters for your health. I think we are officially live. So, welcome everybody, episode 26 of the NC podcast. Today we have one of my best friends who I have not gotten to catch up with in a while. We've both been insanely busy, and we also live in different cities now. Not only is he one of my really good friends, he also is my coach, and we did some awesome stuff. I mean, what a prep. That last prep was insane. It was fun. And I've coached you to shows, and you've just gotten done with recently a strongman competition.
Yep.
So everybody meet Nick. This is Nick Newport. He lives in Cincinnati, Ohio. And
Newport, to be specific.
What's that?
Live in Newport, but then, yeah.
Nick Newport lives in Newport.
Right.
Works in Cincinnati. We met in Cincinnati. We met working at GNC, which is just amazing.
Oh, man.
Hilarious. But it's so good to have you on. I'm excited to dive into some stuff about training. We don't really talk much about training on this podcast, so this is like going to be like a first episode of the 25, already in. We're talking about training. So there would be nobody else to talk about it with, none other than Mr. Nick Newport himself. So
I'm glad.
Let's start with some background on Nick, because I think it's important to kind of preface this conversation with like who the heck Nick is, why I have him on, but I think he's brilliant. He works with Jensen, Brent up in Cincinnati, Ohio at ASP, Academy of Sports Performance. They do incredible work for youth athletes. I've seen them firsthand. I used to go to that gym years ago, and I've seen it firsthand. And there's a reason that, they have the success that they do because of the results that they get and the minds that go behind those results. So with Jensen and Nick. So fill us in, Nick. Great intro. I'd love to hear a little bit more like a background from you, and then we'll get into kind of some nitty gritty with the topics.
Yeah, and you're a great hype man. Again, I don't think I could get much better of an intro. Quick run through on me. I've been a meathead since, I don't know, probably, well, maybe not a meathead, but loved lifting since I was probably like 13, 14 years old, and it just got graded into being more serious and kind of being a bigger focus than, sports that's why we're lifting or whatever else. And so that turned into pursuing exercise science at Xavier University, got my undergrad there, and then became NSCA, CSCS certified not there long after. And then some other certificates along the way, precision nutrition level 1, and some others that are they're letters. But then started working at the Academy of Sports Performance June 2020, been there since, and I best job I could ever ask for, wouldn't change a thing. And about was it 2.5 years ago now, started my own coaching thing. And started working with guys through that, and not pumping crazy numbers but anything, but prep good amount of people at this point. Worked with just some gen pop people, and then like you said at ASP, I'll work with anywhere from middle school, high school athletes to personal training for people 30s, 40s, 60s, group training. Have my hand on a little bit of everything. 3 bodybuilding shows by this point. Just did that first strongman competition. So a little bit of a young physical culturist, we'll say.
I love it. Love it.
Yeah.
Okay. And wow, really that age range is so wide. So
yeah, it's a lot of gear switching. Because the sort of approach and mentality, or just anything behind a tall, skinny volleyball girl who's stepping into the gym for the first time versus, I've had guy in his mid 40s who had a laminectomy and discectomy. I've worked with, or one of my repeat clients, woman in like her early mid 60s. I work with guys in their 40s. So, it's just like a lot of, and then, might be back to the high level volleyball player, or might have my club rugby guys, or I train some fighters in the morning, do Muay Thai, MMA. So, it's just, there's a lot of like code switching, going back and forth, shifting between gears. But I love all of it. It's awesome, and it's just cool to see so many different aspects of training, whether it's performance, fitness, longevity, what may have you.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm sure a lot of the concepts are similar. It's just in like how you go about their training and whatnot. It's just the specificity for each individual, and in the individualization and all of that. And injuries or chronic back pain or whatever. So I think that's super unique that you're not just like niched down to I only know like how to coach like 15-year-olds.
Yeah.
There are a lot of folks out there. So that's awesome. And that says a lot about your education. It says a lot about Jensen as a mentor too, I would
Yeah,
say.
yeah. I couldn't have asked for a better mentor.
Dude, yeah, what a stud. Okay, right on. Well, that was fantastic. I have some notes or topics that I'd like to dive into with you, Nick, because I think a lot of people are going about a lot of things wrong in training, especially when it comes to injury. And this is not, we're not trying to be physical therapists here. I'm not trying to take that route. I just want people. I've had a lot of injuries myself. I've had a lot of things that when it first happens, you think it's an injury, and it's just like a couple days worth of discomfort. So my first question for you, Nick, now that we've got the intro and everything, everybody knows who you are. I'd love to kind of see like what your take is on training, not necessarily around injuries, but like when you start feeling a tweak or a kink in your neck, or that right knee is just like really ticking you off out of nowhere. Instead of calling it quits and hang it up, I guess, what is that, or what should that look like for the individual? And it may obviously be different for like 15-year-olds versus 60-year-olds or whatever, but I guess what is your approach for that? Because I think a lot of people are going about it wrong.
Yeah, and I think there's definitely, like you're kind of alluding to, a lot of variables that go into that. Um, and I actually plan to use a lot of your aforementioned injuries you dealt with to kind of be points to talk about this, whether you've talked about those previously or not. And so I think a good place to start is kind of focusing in on like what can you do, what can't you do, just kind of establishing that, because I think that kind of provides some like bumpers to work within. And I think it might actually be pretty pertinent to mention when you had that hip fracture. I think that's a pretty good reference for this.
Bro, you
So if you would just kind of give the detail, just a very brief details. I mean, I could put it very brief, but you might have the. But it's essentially you were in that like very like you just moved to Dallas not too long ago. You were riding your bike. It was a part that you weren't really familiar with. You weren't being reckless or anything. It was just part you weren't familiar with. Hit a small curb and launched yourself off your bike, right? And you're
yeah.
kind of hit the ground like sort of knee first. So your femur jammed back in the hip socket, right?
Yep, cracked it.
And so kind of in that time when we were figuring that out, so you still got all your upper days. You were, hobbling around or limping to things.
I had to go to St. Louis the day.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I remember you saying on that flight, man, you never felt so locked up.
Yeah, that was terrible.
But I remember you were kind of going through the leg days. You're like, I'll still try. I'll do this. And so I remember, like unilateral work, like single leg press for you at the time. That was a no-go. That made things worse. I think leg extensions were fine. You squatted with a yoke bar, totally fine. It was maybe a depth was just a little higher. You maybe weren't getting like as deep, but it was still very much productive range. Anyways, fast forward. You finally get to the doctor, get some imaging done, and they, I believe it was a posterior acetabular fracture, correct?
Correct.
And so you were talking to the doc, and he was like, "Yeah, absolutely." And again, I might have this wrong, bad game telephone, but he was like, "Absolutely no lower body for the next like 4 to 8 weeks or something like that," right?
Correct. He said no. No, he didn't say no lower body. He said no weight training.
Yeah, which that is again disclaimer. Well, couple disclaimers. One, this is not medical advice. That's the first one. the second disclaimer, we're not trying to paint doctors, PTs, anybody in a bad light.
Yeah.
Like, and they're doing it from a liability standpoint. If they tell you, yeah, you can do this, and then they don't know if you're going to go out and do something reckless, like, and then you come back and sue them on something stupid.
Yeah.
But I think that is that no weight training is very flawed because again, you're just saying get weak in the next 4 to 8 weeks, and our conversation was a lot like, I'm not telling you not to listen to the doctor. But if you told me that you did yoke bar squats totally fine with no pain, I am led to believe you should continue doing that and keep your lower body strong.
Walking sucked.
Yeah, unilateral
walking
tasks and stuff
full
like that.
limb. But I would, go under a squatting position, and maybe I didn't get 100% of my range of motion. I remember that, but I could actually still put good load on the bar and like still squat. Just getting into the gym was kind of sucky, but like, it was whatever. Yeah, you have all of that accurate. Crazy. That was years ago.
Yeah, no, that was before the show even. That was and what's funny is I think, so just to kind of put a bow on that thought, when we have an injury like that where it's something that's a little bit more like acute trauma, that does need time to heal, and we can't just necessarily like ease our way back. I mean, there's no exercise that's going to make your hip heal faster. That's a bone thing, not a muscle thing or anything else. So I think with something like that, it's focusing on what we can do, and then address like knowing what we can't do, but really honing in on what we can do. And so it was like, okay, more bilateral leg work. Maybe some hinge movements didn't feel great, but other ones were fine. So it's like, okay, we'll just shift away from the unilateral work, go to more bilateral work. If RDLs maybe weren't great, it was, okay, how are seated leg curls? Okay, well, we're just going to do a lot more seated leg curl volume for the time being until you can get back to this point. But then kind of rewinding even a little bit before that injury, I believe, is when you had your back-to-back labrum repairs.
Oh my, yep.
Yeah, and so I think that's another interesting thing too, because I don't know too many people get back-to-back surgeries, let alone back-to-back shoulder repairs. Yeah, and so I think when we even kind of look at, so this is one where it's more like this needs time to heal, time to do its thing. And so there it was, okay, what can we do again? And so I think that is a little bit of a different approach where, because one side was fresh off of surgery, just got cleared before the other side, they did on that. So it was very much like, okay, higher rep, more external stability provided movements to where, are you getting some static? Yeah. So I think, and kind of looking at that, it's like, all right, well, being mindful that you just literally had a surgical repair. And I can't remember if which one you had the tenodesis done concurrently as well. Yeah, on the right. And so, minding there's a couple things that went on. It's like, okay, well, we have to be mindful in how we introduce movements, how we load them, and sort of the weekly volume. And I think this kind of comes into another point of less is more, in a sense, or it's you can always start low, because here's another good one-liner for this. It's like, if a cake is underbaked, you can always put it back in the oven longer, and it's okay, now it's fully ready. If you leave it in too long, it's burnt, you can't unburn it. So in the same way, I think when we're looking at reintroducing training to an injured area or something that's otherwise been affected by surgical intervention or something else, we just have to be very graded and mindful of how you're doing in the session, like what movements those are, and then also communicating. You had an awesome PT, Jimmy, who was really integral in getting you back to just regular training. So between what he would tell you to tell me and relaying what we were doing as well, just kind of building and as tolerated, adding volume and expanding movements as you were feeling more capable. So I guess kind of just starting from a place of this is where we're good, this is where we're comfortable within this box, and then slowly just kind of making a bigger box as time goes on. It's like, okay, adding more movements, being able to tolerate more volume. We're not having any delayed injuries or nagging things days after that would be indicating that maybe we overdid it. And I think that, that's kind of the other side of, something that's just a bit more long duration versus just, while I also was thinking of this, because I was, thinking of these different points to talk about. I also remember now, if we skip all the way forward to your bodybuilding prep, maybe even a little bit before prep, I remember you complaining about your back. You're like, man, my back is just cooked. It's killing me, or stuff. And it's like stuff
in here.
yeah. And we're like stuff in training, and it's like, well, it's not really. You're not having anything you really complain about in the day. And then I remember, I can't remember how long after it was. You said you looked at something under your bed, and you were looking at a spot where, there wasn't a board or wasn't support, like the thing was sagging through, and you were like, and you just adjusted that, and then going forward, your back didn't hurt at all. And so I think there's even some things where it's like, or sort of the context of bringing that story up is that sometimes there's other areas to look at outside of training. I don't think necessarily everything could be attributed to training. I think, training is a very big area to look at and can be responsible for a lot and can provide a lot of solutions. But sometimes it's also what's going on outside of training, what's going on in your daily life. Not even just limited to sleep, or if your bed is messed up, but how's your nutrition, your sleep, your stress, just everything else that goes into your recovery bucket, or that could be influencing the way you're feeling. Have you really checked all your boxes, like crossed your T's, dotted your I's, like to know kind of, am I feeling this way because of this? Or is there sort of something else at play?
Yeah, absolutely. My brain is going down memory lane right now. I forgot all of those.
It's because you've had so many.
Literally. But the hip one really got me. That was like, oh wow, yeah. So that hip situation, I would say the way that I felt, I would say 90% of Gen Pop or more would just not be training for a while. And so maybe, I'm a big advocate of like, okay, like push, like work harder, make it happen, like no excuses, right? I love that to a point.
Yeah.
No. But even if it's a less severe or less significant, injury, or maybe just like a tweak, right? So not even on that extreme side of things, I guess, I think the first rule of thumb is like, don't panic, right? Like don't panic that like something is like, you don't have to take you're like, oh, well, here we go again. I think because then you just start throwing excuses and then you just don't get to the gym. So what I'm hearing is, don't panic. I also heard like less is more in those instances, and just like what feels okay, like what feels okay to do. Okay, maybe we didn't used to do that before, but it works now. So like the utility of that movement or movement pattern or like exercise or whatever back then may not have served you well, but now, we can bring that machine in now because it has a utility now.
Yeah.
So I think like it's good to not have that bias on any specific type of either exercise or machine. Like everything has utility somewhere in some time. So it's very, very interesting. And I think the other thing, so I guess, what about, because I remember when you said like, let's start, I think it was my first labrum surgery. I think I just started training legs like 2 to 3 times a week, which, most people are like, dude, I can't train legs 3 times a week. But when you love training and you can't train your upper body at all, you can probably train 3 times a week legs, So,
absolutely.
And this wasn't even on our plan of talking, but I'd love to hear your points on like, how do you go about that? So say someone has a broken left arm at the elbow, they have a cast up to here, right? So they can't do bilateral, rows, pull downs, bilateral upper body movements. But what can they do? And then how does Nick strategize like where that volume goes? Or like, well, how much of this or how much of that? Like, do you start distributing? Because in my mind, I'm like, okay, well then if I'm not training this, I still have the same overall like recovery capacity. So I could put maybe more into this side, or maybe I could do like put more into the legs. So like, I guess I don't know if I'm even making sense with a question.
No, I get what you're getting at. And I mean, I think in any time where somebody has an affected limb or injured limb or anything that's immobilized or just otherwise can't be directly trained, you should still absolutely train the unaffected side, because there's research showing through a cross-training effect that it will help mitigate muscle loss and strength loss in the affected limb. We don't know exactly how it works yet or what the exact mechanism is, but we know it's a thing. So I think whether it's your dominant, like if your non-dominant side is hurting your dominant side, don't be like, oh, well, I don't want to be so asymmetrical. Like you'd be shocked. Like it will catch up very fast. And the asymmetry, unless you just were absolutely, there was a lot going on in the surgery and stuff is looking way different. I mean, with your bicep tenodesis, we can't tell the difference. Nobody would see you and be like, oh yeah,
I can.
I know you can, but that's the bodybuilder in you. And so I think, yeah, it's looking at, okay, if somebody's in a cast, I mean, and it's even thinking about like, okay, where is the break? How is it? And I mean, again, I don't want to make this sound so complicated to where I'm looking at the exact bone and the break and the type and everything. But I mean, I remember there was one time there was a girl who she had a cast just kind of around her forearm here. And it was just for like a part of her thumb, but like around the wrist, pressure, everything like that was fine. And so I put some figure 8 straps on her, and she was doing a T-bar row bilateral, just because she couldn't grip with that, but I could set those figure 8s up on her, and she could do that and row just fine. And again, so that was a case where it's like, all right, the thing was higher up, the straps were, above that, so it wasn't an issue. So I think, there's of course workarounds, and even like, if it's a hand thing or whatever else, how big or how small, but we'll just stick with the cast, like you said. I think it's like, okay, well, so we're limited by, we can't use that side, you can't really reach around or you do anything useful, so it's like, okay, safety bar, spider bar, just anything to where you don't have to stabilize something on your back, or even machines where you can be locked in. I mean, bilateral training obviously would be out of the picture in that case. But I think, depending on how many times a week I'm working with a person or how many times a week they train, just whatever factors there, I think, again, you could start at a place of higher volume in the unaffected areas because like, let's just pretend it's a bodybuilder just to make it easy. Okay, my left arm is in a cast, can't do anything here. It's like, okay, well, you still leg press, still yoke bar squat. You could do a Hatfield squat pretty much. I mean, using the other side for assistance. And yeah, just even starting like maybe you train legs once a week before. It's like, okay, well, let's see how you respond to 2. And then just sort of putting a little bit more volume into their weekly training just by having that other leg day. And then, okay, are the quads recovered in time to present overload? Okay, now we can put a little more volume there. Or, oh, are your hamstrings recovering? Not really. It's like, okay, well, maybe let's give it some time, see if they acclimate to the training. And then maybe it's even that you don't have that hamstring volume in that same day as the leg volume. I mean, I think you are afforded a lot more solutions than you're aware of, but it's just like breaking this mold of like, oh, my leg work has to be in this leg day, or oh, I have to train, both things, or I can't just go in and do, just one side upper. And I mean, it can look a lot of different ways, but I think, it's just sort of identifying what they can do, what they have access to, and what they're trying to accomplish. And I think those are really kind of the 3 steps that whenever somebody is coming to me and they have an injury or something pops up, it's like, that's where my head goes.
Yeah. Fantastic. So, I mean, how often are you working with folks, whether it be gym pop or athlete, where you have to navigate that? I feel like with your role, probably.
Or sorry, you go ahead.
Just like with your role, probably quite a bit, I would assume.
Yeah, I mean, working a lot with athletes, and I mean, at that, like I said, training fighters. I mean, they're always hurt or something always doesn't feel good, but they won't tell you. They will be the last person to tell you something doesn't feel good, which always makes my job a little bit more interesting, but in the best way possible. I mean, I always say, like, it's so fun training fighters. It's like I could tell them, like, you see that wood chipper outside? I want you to go jump in it. And their only question would be head first or foot first. That's it.
Hilarious.
But then, same with like, I worked with some D3 club rugby guys, they're all like, I think maybe from mid 20s into early 40s. And so it's like, contact heavy sport. And same thing, those guys are there to work. They don't have any qualms about it. And athletes too. I mean, whether it's something from practice or, or maybe it was from club or high school or a skill session, or just they have any number of things going on. It's like, okay, is this an overuse injury or is this an acute injury? And so I'd say generally, or even if it's an athlete returning to play, like they just had a surgery, like an ACL repair, I work with people who get hurt frequently, and I have to make adjustments or audibles frequently. And I think it's even on my end, or somebody who is working with people like that, it's just being comfortable with making changes on the fly. And okay, if we can't do A, what's B? And then if B isn't there, what's C? And then, all the way down to Z, like just kind of having things to go to where if I can't do this, what is the next, biggest thing to work on, or the next most important thing you've identified as an area of focus. I think that's really sort of whenever you're dealing with an injury or setback, just sort of where you should go to.
That's awesome. I think that just goes to show the importance of working with someone like yourself, like like as a coach, right? Or as a client of someone like a coach of that does what you do and has that knowledge base, because other if not, they're either going to not train at all and not get anywhere and get weaker, right? Create probably a lot of compensation, if you will, etc. And then also not, if they do train, not know how to allocate where that volume goes, or oh, that's a little iffy, let's try this. Like the direction is just not going to be there. So I think that's extremely important. Those are really, really good points around injuries, and even like just minor tweaks that might not be injuries. Like, I think the takeaway here is you can definitely still, well, again, not medical advice, but more often than not, you can still train to at least some degree in some way, whether it's modified, limited, restricted, whatever, but at least it's something, and you're still getting a benefit on your body, whether it be for health, fitness, sport, whatever. So I really like that strategy versus like, nope, you got to get on the bench and just like rest and you'll magically heal.
Yeah.
Like,
and sorry, not to jump in, but just like
Go ahead.
modify, and that brought to a really good point. And I think you can even look at injuries, and I'm not the first person to categorize this. I forget exactly where I heard it from, but it was something in terms of when it comes to like movement patterns or exercises and injury, things like that. We can look at modification or avoidance. And, it kind of goes back to like we were saying earlier, like what type of injury, what things. So there's times where we can do an exercise and modify, say just, oh, my shoulder doesn't feel good at 60 degrees incline to pressing. It's like, okay, well, how's 45? Or how is 75? Just modifying to make that better. Or like a squat, like, oh, that hurts my knees if my feet are like hip width apart. It's like, okay, well, what if we bump your feet out, turn your feet out? Like, how does it feel now? But then there's other times where, again, it's like if you have somebody who is, fresh off of surgery, that's avoidance. That needs time to heal. That needs time to not be aggravated, and just to, everything structurally repair. So I think that was just a relevant tidbit to put in there.
Yeah, good point. Very good point. Okay. I guess, I mean, shoot, we're at 30 minutes. We've talked about injuries only. This is great. A lot of good information. And so the next thing I kind of wanted to talk about with you, because you've showed me so much in this aspect of things, is intensity in training. I kind of want to just cover in some ways, however you'd like to go about it, giving you full autonomy here with this. But I want to touch on like junk volume, what, quote unquote, what someone would consider that, and how to get more out of less with your training, because it's pretty obvious that you don't just do more. There's a strategy to it. And so how do we find how to train, like what is intense in training? Like, what is intensity, and what is like true training to quote unquote failure? How do we find that? How do we stay consistent with that, especially if we don't have like a spotter, or somebody to, help make us feel secure in training and all that, or have a coach there on deck. Let's dive into that. And I don't know if I asked a question there, if that makes any sense.
No, I got the points. So I think we can start by kind of tackling training intensity, because I think that's probably the best place to start. And so this goes back to another fun memory. I don't know if you remembered. One of the first times we were at the gym together at Crunch, and we were kind of talking about RIR, and I just kicked that idea to you. It just kind of like, yeah, we were talking about it, and I was like, I think it was incline dumbbell presses. And it's like, get a weight, and I want you to do something that you think you could do like 13 reps with, or maybe you have something like one more rep in the tank. And so you did 12, and I was like,
Two. I remember vividly.
two reps in
Two.
the tank.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think you did like 12, and I was like, okay, so what did you think about it? You're like, yeah, I think I had like one more maybe, or like two more maybe. And it was like, okay, next set, do as many reps as you can. And next set, I mean, I wasn't even like in your ear screaming at you. I mean, I was like standing there spotting you, but I was by no means like hyping you up or anything. And I think you did like 17 or 18 reps. So I think just proximity to failure and kind of recognizing that or being aware of that is a good place, at least for people primarily training for hypertrophy or, just getting more jacked. It's a good place to start because um, at least in theory, you're looking at, different models. It's like the reps closest to failure, the most stimulating. And depending on what you look at, could be anywhere like 0 to 2, 0 to 4. And this is a whole other can of worms, but we'll save for another day. But and I think, again, depending on beginner, intermediate, advanced, the importance of training in a close proximity to failure definitely becomes more important as you rank up kind of from beginner going to intermediate to advanced. And training to failure is a skill. It's just like any other movement or anything else in life. It's you have to spend some time working towards it to be equipped to know like that's failure. And there's other things that kind of go along to contribute. It's like, okay, your execution, tempo, technique, but without getting in the weeds on that, I think, kind of this is a good point to go to like, okay, well, what is failure? And there's so many different ways to define failure, whether that's concentric failure, like, okay, you can't finish the up portion of a movement or the joint shortening, like if it was a curl, like the elbow flexing, like you couldn't curl it up all the way. Or it could be to technical failure. Say you were doing them with a super controlled tempo, pause, lowering everything, and then you're not able to maintain that tempo or execution. That's technical failure. Or we could say momentary muscular failure, which this might be butchering, but just like, okay, you're to the point where it's just like everything else is getting involved and anything but the muscle is being used, or you're having to use everything else to finish the movement. And so I think most people, when they're thinking failure, they're thinking concentric failure. That's the, can't finish the rep, um, which I think is generally a good place to align. Um, and I think part of it, if you're a beginner or someone that's newer, I mean, maybe there's like, I just want to make sure my technique's good, or I'm doing this right, or maybe there's some hesitance, or maybe people are uncomfortable with sort of that, depending on the rep range. If you're doing a set of 15 to 20, that burn can be very, very uncomfortable. But at the same time, it's also keeping your technique in check, saying something if you're doing like 4 to 6 or 6 to 8, there's just different kinds of things you encounter when you train to a close proximity to failure with these different rep ranges. And I think that's kind of how you get the most out of the volume you're doing. Just to kind of tie this into the next point, going towards jug volume, I think if we're, let's just say, our unit of stimulus is a set, and we're doing this set, and, in a session, let's say we have, 4 sets of direct chest work. If I'm leaving, if we took that example for you where it's like you did that and it's like, okay, I think I maybe had 2 reps left. So it's like, if you did 3 or those 4 sets and it's like you only went to 12, it's like you still had those reps in the tank that you maybe could have done to get, a much better growth stimulus for your chest. Whereas, if you continue doing that, it's like, okay, you're kind of like leaving money on the table. There's, other things you can do. And so before just giving you a ton of volume, it's like, okay, well, are you making the most of this volume, like getting those reps where it's hard? And there's times to have higher volumes, times to have lower volumes, and depending on the person, there's times to be in a closer proximity failure or further away proximity failure. But I think again, now it just kind of ties into, if we look at this like a medication, it's like you want to get the most from the least. You want to get the most benefit, least side effects, or what may have you. And so if we look at like this like a dose, like I'm trying to get the highest return from this set. It's like, okay, I probably should train at a pretty close proximity to failure where it's like, just about 0 reps left in the tank, maybe 1 or so. And again, it's refined by, spending time in the gym, spending time in training, going to failure. And of course, there are different exercises and setups that make that easier. And that's its own rabbit hole to get into. But I think that's kind of the briefest I'm capable of putting it at this time.
That's all really good points. I think so. With that, I mean, what would you? Where do I want to go with this? So intensity for strength athletes, and then maybe intensity for hypertrophy athletes. Is there a difference there in terms of like proximity to failure? Because you're training for different goals and different purposes. So I guess walk me through what intensity for, because you've done both, right? I mean, you just won the strongman competition, and you've also won plenty of bodybuilding competitions. So like the training intensity, maybe it just is like almost like a different way of putting it for the intensity. But I'm gonna let you.
Yeah, for sure. And just so people don't think I'm super grandiose, it was a novice class for the strongman, and it's like 3 bodybuilding shows, 2 overalls, 1 like 4th place class. So still got a ways to go before I'm decorated. But again, I always appreciate the hype. But yeah, intensity. So just again, so for somebody more focused on hypertrophy, that proximity to failure, we could say RIR, reps in reserve. That's just how many do you have left in the tank. And most like meatheads are generally working in a close proximity to failure. And it's intuitive. A lot of people, will train with RIR, whether they know it or not. It's just a name we're kind of giving to something people may already be doing. Now, I think when we're looking at intensity for powerlifting or strength sport, that's, powerlifting will be a much neater example. It's just kind of, as it relates to load on the bar. That's a general, there's still like RPE, which rate of perceived exertion, which can change on a given day. You say you're having a really good day, something that might feel like a 8 out of 10. That's a generally used RPE scales, like 1 to 10. And so you have something that feels like an 8 out of 10. That's like on a good day, it might feel like, oh, that was like a 7. I can do that easy. Whereas like on a hard day, it's like, oh man, that thing that would normally be an 8 was like a 9. And so there's a lot of different ways to look at it, but kind of with the population I work with and people I work with, we just kind of look at RIR as the inverse of RPE. And for powerlifting, it gets much more nuanced and there's much more specifics, and you could even get into percentages, and there's even some velocity based training to back up certain intensities. But I think, when I'm working with like Gen Pop or kind of athletes, people like that, I use kind of RPE and RIR are inversely related. So it's like a 2 reps in reserve would be like an RPE 8. Or like a RPE 9 would be 1 rep in reserve, or a 10 out of 10 RPE would be like no reps left. And of course, like I said, it gets much more complex than that when you're zeroing in specifically into powerlifting or other strength sport. But I think that's kind of an easy way you can look at it. And even like training intensity with powerlifting. So I've never done a powerlifting competition. I work with some powerlifters, and there's a lot of powerlifters who train at our facility. People who could put it much better than I could, but generally speaking, like when you're training for strength adaptations, there's still periods where you want to work in a close proximity to failure, but there's also times where you don't want to train to failure because you're training to be technically proficient at a movement. And so, and you're training under fatigue conditions, the technique is usually a thing that goes sloppy, or even I think maybe a relevant comparison. So it's like, for power lifters, it's like you're training to make 1 rep as perfect as you can. And so rep 1 and rep 5 may look different and can look different. With bodybuilding, it's like you're trying to stimulate a muscle. So rep 1, you're not trying to just do 1 all-out effort on a movement. So rep 1 to rep 5 may look exactly the same, or even depending on your rep range. I mean, of course there will be some drop off and like fatigue, and some maybe the movement slows down. But generally speaking, if you have a power lifter and a bodybuilder, and you have them both do like a set of 15 of something or a set of 10, there would be a lot more similarity rep to rep with that bodybuilder, 1 to 10, than there would be with like a power lifter 1 to 10. And this is not saying, oh, power lifters are bad at reps or anything. This is just to try to illustrate a point.
Love it. Are you getting feedback?
Maybe a little, but it's not nearly what it was before.
Okay. I don't know what it was. It's like kind of sneaking into it. Anyways, that's fantastic. Really good points there. And so I think I don't want to keep you all night either.
I
But
always got time for you.
I almost like, because I see this all the time. People are like, you've got to try this exercise, or you've got to try, like, you've got to do it this way or that way. And it's like, how into the woods are some people getting with this stuff? Like a tricep extension, they're like, oh, well, you got to do it this way. It's like, at the end of the day, it's a dang tricep extension. I don't know if well, you're in the training space. You definitely know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And have seen this in real time. But like, I feel like we are overcomplicating a lot of exercises when at the end of the day it's just the same stuff, or should be. Like,
Yeah.
I see like people do sissy squats like on a decline, and they've got like this, they took 30 minutes to get this stuff set up in the gym, when they could have just done like the plain exercise, the quote unquote boring,
The non-optimal.
yeah. Yeah, like, why are we fancying these things up?
Yeah.
Social
And so
What-
I think that it's, this is just kind of the direction the pendulum is swung, at least talking about people saying this is the optimal movement or this is the most stable movement. And so it's just like people get attached to these ideas and we get into these camps where it's like, this is superior, just very dogmatic and tribalistic, like we're right, they're wrong. And, that gives people some comfort. But really, it's like when we're looking at these, like I think you were dead on with like people are overcomplicating things. I think it generally, wherever you are in training or your career or just whatever your athletic pursuit or endeavor is, you want to make things only as complicated as they need to be. I mean, as someone who works in training people, working with athletes, I wish stuff was more complicated. It'd be a hell of a lot easier to sell.
Yeah.
If it was that complicated, it's like, oh well, I have all the secrets.
Yeah.
But I think what's needed and complexity gets graded as somebody progresses through that beginner, intermediate, advanced. And it's like, if you're a beginner and your complexity is already maxed out, it's like, okay, so what are you going to leverage to progress then? What do you go to next if you're already at the most complicated thing? And I think even like you're alluding to with some of these elaborate setups, things like that. I mean, of course, at the end of the day, if it gets you to train, gets you to work hard, do the thing. But I think generally speaking, a lot of these things are, either convenient or in terms of the movements that work or the old movements. I've seen squats grow a lot of people's legs. It's hard to dispute that those are a great leg builder. I've seen leg presses build people's legs, leg extension, and again, it go to like if you're modifying or doing these things, like if you're injured and this is a setup that you don't feel and it like you are in your joints and you only feel it in the muscles, like yeah, by all means, spend that time, do that exercise, but you shouldn't be taking a significant portion of your training session to just set up an exercise or occupy multiple pieces of equipment just so you can get the most optimal movement done.
At the end of the day, you're just taking the muscle, stretching it, and you're squeezing it, whether it's via this. Like,
and even like with the what these people are trying to base it on is like, oh, this is the optimal line of pull or this is the most leverage. It's like, okay, what are you referencing? It's 99% of the time it's people or it's these young guys on social media who are trying to get a rise or a following, or maybe they're serious. And I don't want to be overly critical of them or these other things. It's just that's what gets clicks, that's what gets views. But it's like, okay, if you change the entire way you train based on a study, your training wasn't very good to start. Like one study or one finding or one pendulum swing should not wholly change how you do anything. It should be added into the consideration of everything else you do. So I mean, if I see tomorrow that there's a study that doing these tricep extensions with a cuff around your bicep to offer some counter force or whatever leads to 30% more tricep growth, and I look at that study and it was done on natural amateur bodybuilders, I'll be like, oh, okay, that's something to really consider. But if I also see that it was done on 60-year-old stroke patients, it's like, all right, that's something else to consider. That's not really the full picture. And so just not saying not trust anything, but just be as not even a skeptic, but just use critical thought. Just, okay, is this study they're referencing, is this a relevant population? What are the methods reasonable or even replicable? I think, again, it's just people take an idea and they run with it because it offers some sense of we know something you don't.
Yeah.
So
nailed it.
all to say, the basics have been a basics because they work.
I love it. So I kind of want to wrap up here with a couple things about you. So we're gonna make this a little fun. So it's 1, 2, 3. So I want to know, what is your one favorite cheat meal, two places the listeners can find you, and three of your favorite books on training you'd recommend.
Okay.
I
So
gave it all at you all
yeah.
at once.
So favorite cheat meal.
Yeah.
Oh man. I say you Five Guys, but not getting it. You got to eat it in the restaurant because I mean, otherwise you just get the soppy bun. That or I mean, if we just go to a cheat dessert like cheesecake, you just cannot go wrong. Plain cheesecake, it's where it's at.
Cheesecake.
Yeah, it's not a cheap meal. That gets a little bit out of like, okay, that's a dessert, but I'm just tacking that on because it's like, I mean, you can't go wrong.
Okay.
So two places you can find me. We'll just go with Instagram for both of those. I think the primary page I use now, it's ASP Nick underscore NPP, and then the other page where I primarily uh, post about bodybuilding and just the online clients I work with. It's Newport Physique and Performance. And then what was
ASP.
Oh yeah, and ASP. Yeah, it can also be found at the Academy of Sports Performance. Um, Again, great facility, great people, great equipment. Just can't talk highly enough about it. And then what was number three?
Uh, 3 books.
Oh, 3 books as it pertains to training. Um, so I think oh, I'm gonna butcher it because I don't have it right offhand. I think it's Science and Practice of Hypertrophy Training, or Scientific Principles of Hypertrophy Training. It's a Renaissance periodization book. And I think that's a really good book for anybody who's interested, specifically in hypertrophy training and just seeing some of the kind of a lens that kind of just quantifies some of these training variables a little more, makes them a little easier to understand. Um, and then How to Be Your Own Bodybuilding Coach by Dr. Scott Stevenson. That's another excellent read. That gets to be a little bit denser and cover more topics than just training, but still can't go wrong with that. And then a good third.
Right.
It's not. Oh, does it? It has to be a training book. Oh man. Oh,
A third. I don't want to. I don't want to. You know.
if I just have to pick a third book as a loose,
Yeah.
just to throw in, not directly training, but just kind of understanding and seeing stuff how it works with your body is Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. That's just a great book to read. Just as far as understanding like the interaction of just sympathetic or parasympathetic state in your body, different hormone interactions, and just sort of how your stress response influences the rest of these systems in your day-to-day life. I think that's another good read I would recommend to anybody.
Anybody, yeah, who maybe not even ever has trained before, doesn't even want to.
Yeah.
I encourage it, but like knowing those things that are in that are like some of the most important for yourself and for even your friendships, for your relationships, for your circle. Like when somebody comes to you who might be in a very sympathetically driven state, it might help you like have a better conversation with them and help them, right? So very, very good points. So good books. Good. You make me want to have a freaking burger now. Dang. Five Guys, I miss it. I haven't had Five Guys since I moved out of Ohio. So 5 years. Crazy,
man.
I really, really, really appreciate your time. This has been easily the longest one I've done.
Yeah, I was gonna say 51 minutes.
51 minutes. Yeah. So any final thoughts or notes that you'd like to leave everybody with to close things out today, dude?
Yeah. I guess just the general kind of like we said before, there are more solutions to your problems than you think, whether that's training or outside of training. And just that it is what you make of it. I mean, if you want it to be this journey of self-improvement or refinement or proficiency at a skill, task, or sport, it's it can be that. Or if it becomes this thing that is taking away from you and you view it as a stressor, it'll become that. Either way, you should view it as something, and hopefully it is something that adds to your life and, you know, just your overall pursuit. Um, and then that, I just, again, glad we could catch up and just super thankful to, you know, talk. I mean, uh, just that anybody will consider any of this and give me the time of day to hear this. I'm grateful for anybody who has hung out this long. How you listen to me ramble for this is nothing less than a feat of willpower itself.
Well, I appreciate you so much, man. It's great to have you. We're gonna have to do more because you know that was just only that was like barely scratching the surface of training, but very very good depth for each of those categories. So thank you so much, dude. I appreciate you, and everybody listening. We will catch you next time. Thanks for tuning in.
Absolutely.